All right, let's jump right into this explainer and definitively answer the single biggest question left hanging by Martin Scorsese's masterpiece of a psychological thriller, Shutter Island. Look, if you're anything like most viewers, you've probably debated this ending for years, poring over every single frame to figure out what was actually real and what was just a hallucination. Well, today, we are not guessing. We're going to look strictly at the facts, the visual evidence, and the clinical timeline presented in the film to completely deconstruct this incredible mystery. So rather than stringing you along, let's just clear the air and establish reality right out of the gate. There is absolutely no dark government conspiracy happening on this island. None. Teddy Daniels is actually Andrew Laeddis. He is a highly dangerous, deeply traumatized patient at Ashcliff Hospital. And this entire massive investigation he thinks he's leading, it's actually an elaborate, radical role-play therapy experiment designed by his doctors. Dr. Cawley and Dr. Sheehan are just desperately trying to break through his delusions to prevent him from being permanently lobotomized by the hospital's board. The stakes literally could not be higher here. For Andrew, this role-play is his absolute last chance to hold on to his own mind. Every single thing that happens on the island is meticulously orchestrated to force him to confront his suppressed reality before it's too late. Section 1. Clues in plain sight. Let's see how this all builds, starting right from the very first scenes of the film. Long before that final lighthouse reveal, Scorsese actually hides the truth right in front of us through these tiny, seemingly minor physical details. And they prove that these men aren't who they claim to be. Just think about it for a second. In the 1950s, a hardened U.S. Marshal would absolutely have his own cigarettes, right? But Teddy constantly has to bum them off Chuck or the staff. Why? Well, because psychiatric patients in an asylum aren't allowed to carry matches. And when Chuck is asked to hand over his firearm, notice how he awkwardly fumbles to unholster it. A trained law enforcement officer definitely wouldn't struggle with his own gun, but a psychiatrist, for sure. And look really closely at the guards. They grip their rifles so tightly, watching Teddy with extreme caution. That's not out of resentment. They are terrified of the most unpredictable patient on the island. Even the guards conducting the search for the missing patient seem completely apathetic. They aren't trying because they know perfectly well that nobody is actually missing. During his investigation, Teddy is interrogating the hospital staff and the patients. And whenever he asks about the primary psychiatrist, Dr. Sheehan, the room gets incredibly awkward. Nurses dart their eyes nervously, patients look down at the floor. Now, Teddy assumes they're hiding some dark secret, but imagine how stressful it must be for those nurses and patients. They are nervous simply because Dr. Sheehan is literally standing right next to Teddy, playing the role of his partner, Chuck. They are absolutely terrified of slipping up and ruining this super fragile role-play experiment right in front of the head doctors. Section 2. The Patient 67 Puzzle. As Teddy is desperately searching for the truth, he finds this cryptic slip of paper left by his doctors asking the Law of 4, who is 67. This is a deliberate breadcrumb. They left it just to get his detective mind working. Later on, in a boardroom meeting with Dr. Cawley and the administrators, Teddy aggressively breaks down the logistics of the hospital wards, trying to prove he's onto their game. He points out there are 21 patients in Ward A for men, 21 in Ward B for women, and 24 violent offenders in Ward C. But when you add those up, the total acknowledged patients only comes to 66. So, the crucial point here is that patient number 67 is the unaccounted missing piece of this entire puzzle. Who in the world is the 67th patient housed at Ashcliff? It is, of course, Teddy himself. Andrew Laeddis is patient 67. The doctors were essentially banking on his intelligence. They were hoping his own investigative skills would lead him to deduce his own existence within the asylum's records. They're effectively tricking his delusional persona into discovering his real identity. It's just a fascinating way of using the mind's own defenses to heal itself. Section 3. The visual code. Beyond the physical clues and the numbers, Scorsese uses a brilliant subconscious visual code to separate delusion from reality. It's a masterful use of cinematic environment to tell the story without saying a single word. It illustrates the film's elemental rule perfectly. Fire is always present to fuel his hallucinations, while water acts as the harsh intruder trying to wash away the delusion and force him to confront the facts. Seriously, every single time Teddy hallucinates, or retreats into his fantasy, or speaks to someone who isn't real, fire is present. When he meets the real Rachel Solando in the sea cave, they're sitting by a campfire. When he dreams of his dead wife Dolores, her back is glowing with embers and the room turns to ash. He's constantly lighting matches in the dark to keep his fantasy alive. On the flip side, water is the reality he is desperate to suppress. His terrible trauma originates from his children drowning in a lake. Notice how a massive, violent storm hits the island, literally trying to wash his delusions away. There's this incredible moment that ties directly into this elemental code, and it's one of my favorites. During an interrogation with a female patient, she asks for a drink. When she raises her hand to her mouth, there is no glass. She is mimicking drinking from thin air. But when she places her hand back on the table, an empty glass suddenly appears. Now, this isn't a continuity error, no way. It is a terrifying glimpse into Teddy's perspective. His brain is so terrified of water that when she mimics drinking, his mind literally edits the glass of water entirely out of his vision. He refuses to see it, until he has no choice but to acknowledge it when she sets it down with an audible clink. This is a brilliant detail to take away because it shows us just how incredibly powerful the human brain is at protecting itself from trauma by physically altering perception. Section 4. The real timeline. To truly understand why Andrew developed such an intense aversion to reality, we have to look clinically at the actual chronological events that broke his mind. The tragedy of Andrew Laeddis is built on compounding layers of profound grief. Back in the 1940s, he experienced severe trauma as a soldier, liberating the Dachau concentration camp during World War II. He returned home with severe PTSD and a drinking problem. And because of his own struggles, he neglected the worsening mental illness of his wife, Dolores. In 1952, this neglect reached a horrific climax when Dolores, who was suffering from untreated psychosis, drowned their 3 children in a lake behind their house. Upon discovering this, a totally shattered Andrew shot and killed his wife. This horrific sequence of trauma, compounded by his crushing guilt over neglecting his family, shattered his psyche, causing him to invent the heroic Teddy Daniels persona. He literally could not live in a reality where he was a childless widower who pulled the trigger on his own wife. Throughout the film, the staff constantly refer to him as the most dangerous patient on the island, which, might seem like an overreaction for a man who committed a crime out of sheer tragic grief. But the doctors don't consider him dangerous simply because of his past crimes. He is dangerous because his paranoid delusions cause him to violently attack anyone who challenges his fabricated reality. In his own mind, he is a righteous investigator. So if a fellow patient or a guard accidentally breaks his illusion by calling him Andrew, he lashes out brutally. He severely beats other patients just to protect his fantasy. He is entirely unpredictable, and his reality distortion field puts literally everyone around him at risk. Section 5. The final, tragic choice. This brings us to the lighthouse and the ultimate emotional gut punch of the final scene. Dr. Cawley finally corners him, lays out all the evidence, and successfully shatters the delusion. Andrew wakes up, remembers his terrible past, and accepts who he really is. But the doctors face a devastating aftermath the very next morning. Andrew's sitting on the steps with Dr. Sheehan. He turns to the doctor, calls him Chuck, and starts talking about getting off the island and escaping the conspiracy. The doctors exchange this heartbroken look. They think the therapy has failed, he's regressed, and now he must be lobotomized. But then, Andrew delivers this incredible line. Which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man? It completely reveals that the therapy actually worked. He is fully cured and completely lucid. But he is consciously choosing to feign a relapse, to undergo a lobotomy, rather than live with his unbearable memories. He's literally choosing to have his mind erased while believing he is the heroic Teddy Daniels, rather than living one more day knowing what happened to his family. And this leaves us with a truly profound philosophical dilemma. If curing a patient only guarantees them a lifetime of agonizing grief and guilt, is the cure actually worse than the disease? Andrew's final decision is an act of total surrender, a choice to destroy his own mind just to finally find peace. It leaves us with a haunting final thought on the terrifying weight of trauma, concluding our explainer on the brilliant, layered tragedy of Shutter Island. Take a moment to really think about the incredible depth Scorsese built into every single frame of this film. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning what you see.